This is a part of a series of videos about how to use technology to do your, or to help you with your IB Math Studies SL internal assessment. The previous two videos went through standard deviation and correlation coefficient, so the R value. If you are going to use those processes, please go through those videos. If you are going to use chi-square value, this is what this video is about. So a couple of things that I have been mentioning in the previous videos, if you haven't watched them, is the importance of laying out your answers, your tables, sorry. So I've broken down the equation for finding the chi-square value into different columns, and I've clearly labeled out the steps. So obviously you will be doing all of this in Word document, but there's no issue in starting in Excel and then copying everything into Word. But it's important to label your tables clearly as to show what type of process you're doing in each column. These can be found by going through or going to insert equation. It's the same position in Word document. So the formula for chi-square value is quite easy. It's by taking the observed value minus the expected value, square this number, and then divide by the expected value. Then you add all these numbers up. So this is what we're going to do. So the first thing we need to find the expected value is to first find the sum of each row and column. So I'm going to do that here. You can create another table and call it the contingency table if you want to, but that would be a bit redundant. So I'm just going to do this, drag the formula through. And then drag it here. It should be 115. You can check by summing these numbers or the numbers inside. So now that you've got all the totals, we can actually do the expected value for each one. And you should know how to do this. So the expected value for male will be the total for billiard multiplied by the total for male divided by the total for the table. Now I want to drag this through, and the two values that will not change are the table total and the male. So I'll just change these values to 115 and 63. And I'm going to drag this through, and it should still be correct. If you check all the values, this is still the male snooker, and this is the male darts. So it should all be correct. If you're not comfortable with these shortcuts, you can do all the formulas from scratch. So for the females, it's going to be billiard multiplied by female total divided by the table total. And again, I'm going to drag this through, and the two values that won't change are the table total and the females. So I can change these two. And that's it. We got the expected value, the expected values in the table. You can check these values using your calculator. Usually when it produces the matrix B, that's where the expected values are, so you can check it there. Now we move on to the actual process of finding the chi-square value. So again, I've broken this down into different parts. First, we take the observed value and we subtract from it the expected value. So the observed value, and we subtract the expected value. And then we repeat this process. Unfortunately for this, we won't be able to drag any of our values down because the values are not laid out nicely. So we'll just have to remember in what order we did each of the calculations. So it's observed minus the expected. And it is predicted to get the negative values, and the way we get rid of these negative values is by actually squaring them. So the next step is squaring what we got, so this multiplied by itself. And we can actually drag this down. And then the last step is to actually divide the squared number by the expected frequency. And you need to remember which order you did the calculations in. So I went in male and then in female order. So this value divided by this value. You can skip through the video as I'm doing these calculations. this should be a bit more straightforward. Okay, and that's the last one. So it's always good practice to make sure that your tables have the same decimal places. So I'm gonna do that by keeping it to, let's say, 4 decimal places, just for accuracy. Because the further you reduce, the less accurate your answer is. And then finally, your chi-square value is just simply the sum of this last column. And that's it, 7.7925. You can use your calculator to check your answer as well. Now, we move on to the conclusion. So that's another thing I wanted to do in this video, is to be able to find your critical value, find your p-value when you don't have the calculator with you. So I'm just going to lay it out. This is what the convention I've been using in class: writing chi-square, writing critical value, writing p-value, writing significance level. And then I'm going to write the values down. And to find the critical value, we basically need to first decide what significance level we're using. The significance level is basically the percentage you use. So you typically see them in questions. They start with, a 10% significance level, or 5%, or 1%, or 2.5%. So the idea of significance level is that it's you wanting to know how certain you want to be about the results. So for example, if you pick a low significance level, then you have a low probability that the experiment happened by chance. Typically, you'll notice that the most convenient significant level people use is 5%, which is 0.05. So this is what I'm gonna just use here. You don't have to use a significance level, it's up to you. So significance level is 0.05, the chi-square value is 7.7925. Now we use the significance level and we use the degree of freedom in order to determine the critical value. And now we do this using a table. I'm going to put the link for this website in the description box, so make sure you check it. So this is the website. I'll just put the values up, and then you have this table with the degree of freedom on the left side, and then the significance level at the top. So we have a degree of freedom of 2 in this case, because it's 1 multiplied by 2. So we have 2. So I'm going to look at this row. And then I'm going to look at the column, which has a significance level of 0.05, which is this column, which means that my critical value is 5.991. 5.991. So obviously my chi-square value is bigger, and you can conclude that you can reject the null hypothesis, or there's enough evidence to reject the null hypothesis, assuming that your null hypothesis is that the choice of game is independent of gender. So you can reject null. Obviously, you won't write it this way. You'll write it much nicely in a sentence, a full paragraph. You reject the null hypothesis and you accept the alternative hypothesis. Now, in order to reinforce or make sure, double check that you're doing the right calculations, that's when we use the p-value. You don't have to use it in this case, but it just makes good mathematical practice too. You can take the p-value from your calculator. It won't be counted as a mathematical process though, but you've already done the chi-square test, so that's fine. But you could actually just use this process as well. So what you do to find the p-value is, well, again, you go to degree of freedom, and then you look at the number, the first number that's higher than your chi-square value. And the first number higher than the chi-square value is 7.824. and this corresponds to a 0.02 value here. And so your p-value, this is where we were, so your p-value will be between these two values, 0.025 and 0.02, so you go to the value bigger than the value you got to. So the p-value is between 0.02 and 0.025. Now this is obviously less than your p-value, and so again we reject the null hypothesis. The actual p-value is 0.020318 according to the calculator, so that's an accurate value that you could use to double check that you've made the right conclusion. And that's it. This is you doing the chi-square value. Just make sure that you lay out your answer clearly, you show the formula, you show all the steps that you're doing and the correct conclusion. If you're using this website, do put the links in just for the sake of being coherent in your mathematical writing. Hopefully this was useful. Make sure you check the other videos if you feel like they're going to help in terms of your math IA.